Hello, my name is TKDtrain 2004, and today I'm going to talk to you about something near and dear to my heart. 20 years ago, a tragedy struck the United States of America. A total of 4 civilian aircraft were compromised and thousands of lives were lost. Inner chaos on America's homeland drove many to fear and anxiety. The September 11th attacks would change the United States forever. At 7:59 a.m. on September 11, 2001, 92 people took off on an American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston's Logan International Airport, due for Los Angeles, California. The plane was a Boeing 767 and could hold more than 20,000 gallons of fuel. 15 minutes later, another 767, United Airlines Flight 175, took off with 65 people from the same airport, headed for the same location. These two planes would have a sudden change of course, headed instead for New York City. Around this time, at 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757, left Dulles International Airport near Washington, D.C., destined to touch down in Los Angeles. It carried 64 passengers. The fourth and final plane hijacked, scheduled to take off at 8 a.m., should have been in the air already, but delays caused United Airlines Flight 93 with 44 people from Newark International Airport at 8:41 a.m., due for San Francisco. Little did they know that in just 5 minutes, the United States would witness some of the worst acts committed against them on their own soil. 8:46 a.m. American Airlines Flight 11, now hijacked and in control by Mohammed Atta, crashed into the 90th level floors of the North World Trade Center. The 110-floor building was left with a hole in its neck and fire on its floors. All 92 people inside that Boeing 767 lost their lives, with hundreds more being killed instantly due to the impact in the tower. The news media went crazy. Reports of a freak accident on the World Trade Center buzzed around every New Yorker's ear, and for a while, everyone remained stunned, until disaster struck again. What follows is the report of a British archaeologist named Bruce Mann to the second attack on the Twin Towers. Quote, "Our plane was sitting on the tarmac. We were told there would be a delay because of technical difficulties, but we assumed everything would be okay, and it would be fixed. I looked out the window towards 2 towers visible above the airport buildings. Smoke was coming from one of the towers. I was tired and did not appreciate what I was looking at was the Twin Towers. I thought they were chimneys, and some of us commented how surprising it was to see that level of pollution in New York. As I watched, I saw a plane fly into the tower that was not smoking. There was an explosion and a fireball." At 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 struck lower on the South World Trade Center near the 60th or 70th floors. Soon after, the FAA and Port Authority banned all takeoffs and landings in and around New York, and all bridges and tunnels to New York were closed. President George W. Bush spoke about the attacks from Florida at 9:31 a.m., where he was visiting an elementary school when he learned of the first attack on New York. He called it an, quote, "apparent terroristic attack on our country." But it wasn't long before disaster struck yet again. The Pentagon in Washington, D.C. was hit by American Airlines Flight 77 at 9:37 a.m. A massive leak of jet fuel caused a fire to burn out over some of the structural walls, and part of the western face of the building collapsed. 125 military and civilians were killed in D.C., along with all 64 passengers of Flight 77. Despite the best efforts of NYPD and NYFD, the damage was done. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower, which had been struck lower and later, fell, trapping thousands inside. Not much later, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower fell, 102 minutes after being the first attack on America. The fourth plane mentioned earlier was United Airlines Flight 93. Crew and passengers were soon aware of what was going on, and were able to make contact with family and friends on the ground. Then the passengers attempted to retake the plane, leading the hijackers to suddenly crash the plane in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. This plane, experts believed, was headed for Washington, D.C., and the White House or the buildings of Congress. What went on that day was a lot to comprehend for someone who was trying to do a thorough job of researching such a monumental event in American history like myself. This day changed the course of America forever. On that day in 2001, for the first time ever, every single plane that was over or bound for the United States was grounded, and no one knew what was to come next. It was a breach of security, leading to the creation of the Department of Homeland Security later that year on October 8th by President Bush. And on December 18th, September 11th became known as Patriot Day. The fight against terrorism was not over, however. It took until July 22nd, 2004, before the United States could identify the attacks were of Al-Qaeda origin. And it took until May 2nd of 2011 before United States Navy SEALs finally killed Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. Currently today, we are still in a fight against terrorism. The Taliban in Afghanistan has, as recently as August 15th, 2021, recaptured the city of Kabul due to U.S. forces leaving in large quantities. But this is a story for another time. On this day, the 11th of September, 2021, the 20th anniversary since nearly 3,000 people died in the tragic events of September 11th, 2001, do not forget that all the first responders can do for you. Casualties like this would be over the 3,000 mark, if not for the quick help of fire and police personnel. Do not ever forget that even though this country sees its dark days, there are things that can never be taken away. Like the sound of Mark Anthony singing the national anthem in Shea Stadium, and 30,000 strong singing along with him. God bless America, land that I love.